The Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our ServiceNow series, where we interview the best and brightest of the industry to share their story, advice, and views on the exciting world of ServiceNow and digital transformation.
I'm your host, Ben Sparks, and today we are very lucky to host Gerald Harris. Gerald is an innovative IT leader and digital transformation evangelist with heavy experience in enterprise service management and platform business transformation. He currently holds the role of Director of ServiceNow and has navigated multiple organizations in his career, including Capgemini, and is actually a black belt and instructor in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Gerald's moved through the ranks from analyst to director. And in this conversation, he's going to cover what's truly important in digital transformation. And he's going to look at his career and offer some mentorship through some of the storytelling that he has through his own hindsights. And obviously looking at how ServiceNow is adding value to enterprise customers. So Gerald, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Ben. I appreciate it.
No worries. No, it's happy to have you here. So I'd love to know a bit more about your career so far and maybe looking back, some of the key tipping points, maybe some of the moves, promotions that you've gone through that have really stuck with you.
Really, my first quote unquote job in IT was working in computer labs at Utah State University. But my degrees at Utah State weren't in IT or anything like that. I have degrees in English literature and technical communications. And well, even before that, I guess the first money I made doing anything computer related was when I was about 14 and programming 8-bit games on a Commodore 64. So I've been a geek pretty much my whole life. But with that geek kind of background and the history, the education in communications, I got my first job at Corel WordPerfect. And it was a writing job, but they weren't working me that much. And I started rebuilding their intranet just because I could. And so that turned into a web development position where I ended up leading a couple of different web development groups and eventually became an IT admin at Verisk Analytics subsidiary called Xactware, which is headquartered here in Utah. And that was where I was introduced to ServiceNow and where I had the opportunity to manage Verisk's initial deployment of ServiceNow. And this was pre the Aspen version. So I've been on the tool for 10 years or so. And I think that the key real tipping point for me, I started asking myself much more about the value that I was delivering. What value am I delivering and how can I make that more? That changed everything.
And looking back, you touched on one there, looking back over your career, what have been some of the key learns that you feel have made you successful in a leadership role now?
I think the one thing that is really important is that you have to ask, how can I increase the value I deliver? That's the biggest one. But people also have to understand that if you want your team to grow, you want your team to become better than they are today, then people have to have the opportunity to fail. And if they don't have the opportunity to fail, then they are never going to have the opportunity to grow. And really, if you're not growing, you're dead. We need to grow, we need to build, and that's how you do it.
And we're going to come on a lot to talk about ServiceNow later on in the podcast. But as we mentioned when we first got connected, look, the Alldus podcast touches on mentorship, right? And mentorship by telling stories. A lot of people we speak to are navigating, be that a functional or a technical role, and they're now managing a team, and maybe had dramatically increased headcount over the last year. I'd love to know a little bit more about your journey from analyst through to director, and again, maybe touching on some of the key things that you felt you took on then.
Yeah, I think that some of the early management gigs that I had, where I was managing like a web development group or something similar, they happened by chance. I was there and I was willing, and so I got the job. And the big change for me really happened when it happened with Verisk, where on my first implementation at Verisk, on the very first day of the project kickoff, the guy who was supposed to run the project quit. And we had nobody to run it. So I raised my hand. I took that chance. I knew there was a chance I could fail in this very high profile situation, but I raised my hand and offered to take the lead. And they allowed it, and everything changed. So, like I said earlier, if you're not willing to fail, you're not going to grow. And if you're not growing, yeah, you're dead. You're going to stay right where you're at, and that's it. So take a chance.
That sounds like really, no, definitely. It sounds like one of those kind of sliding door moments where you get the chance to put up your hand and then everything else changed probably after that.
Yeah.
So as a digital transformation evangelist, what are some of the trends you're seeing that are driving or affecting digital transformation in enterprise customers?
Well, one of the things I'm seeing that I don't like, just really quickly, is we see a lot of vendors who are throwing up a single tool and saying, this is digital transformation. They have a way of approaching a single problem, say, this is digital transformation. But they never tell us why we should pay attention to what digital transformation is. And I think we absolutely have to answer that question, why, before we do anything else. And the why of digital transformation, in my real opinion, is all about, we have Moore's Law. Moore's Law is what? Every 18 months, your computer doubles its power, right? So the compute side of data. With Butter's Law, really Butter's Law states something like the amount of data that you can communicate through a single optical fiber doubles every 9 months. And of course, for different mediums, that varies as well. And then there's Kreider's Law, which is the amount of data being stored on a given square centimeter of a hard drive will double every 13 months. So we're seeing how much data we can store, how much data we can process, how much data we can share, communicate, is growing at an absolutely exponential rate. And your customers, my customers, they know this. They see these changes happening, and they expect us to be able to adapt and to grow and improve our service at the same rate. Now, when we fail to do that, we create a gap between where our company is at and where our customers' expectations are at. Then it's that gap where disruption can happen. And disruption is a natural element of any market economy. It happens. And it happens when an organization does not adapt to the way data is growing. And the biggest, easiest to point out example of that is Blockbuster. Look at what happened to Blockbuster when they didn't move to, digital anywhere near quick enough. Okay. There's one store open now after having thousands of stores. One store is open, and that's just because people like to go in for memory's sake. So I have to understand the data is changing so fast, and you have to be ready for it. You have to make that transition from a linear model to that exponential model.
And I know one of the areas that you're super passionate about is the platform business model. Can you talk me through that?
Oh yeah, really a platform business model is, we have the why, which is data, data, data. You have to adapt because of the data. But you're not going to be able to really make that transition unless you also adopt a platform business model, which is the foundation of digital transformation. And why? Because everything, whether it's between departments or companies, company and a customer, doesn't matter. Everybody is either requesting something or they're responding to a request. But what we see with these traditional companies is that the different departments build themselves up together and they're just doing their jobs, very organic, but they end up putting their workforce, their department itself, into silos of work. Now, these are poorly integrated value chains that have a lack of automation, and they make exchanges between departments really expensive to support. I mean, there's a lot of expense to that. Now, if you go from department to department and you have, subsidiaries of a larger corporation, it's even more difficult. Or business to customer, or businesses between businesses. Those simple exchanges are expensive to support. And so when you add that platform business model, you give that one place where all these silos can share workflows, can share processes, can share data and information, where they can collaborate and work and execute more effectively. Then you get into a scenario where the Boston Consulting Group would say that the most fundamental impact of information technology is to radically lower the cost of a transaction, what I was calling an exchange. And a platform business model allows an organization to break down those silos and drastically lower the cost of exchanges between departments, subsidiaries, etc., even between a group of companies. And as the cost of exchanges drops, the ability to increase explodes. And so really, without a platform business model, digital transformation is largely a fantasy. You may buy a widget and it may help for a little while, but your exchanges are still way too expensive and take way too much time.
I love how you're really viewing this from the foundations of what it needs. We had a similar conversation with our AI track about AI and how these things are not magic dusts that you just sprinkle and it goes, everything's all well and good. You need to have those kind of foundations underneath it. Just to put you on the spot a little bit, within the sort of digital transformation framework, if you were going to be coaching a C-suite executive, what are the other related trends that should be front of mind for the C-suite at the moment?
Yeah, easily. If you have the foundation in place, then we can start looking at those other areas. When it comes to trends outside of ServiceNow and a platform business model, etc., I think as these three laws we talked about earlier, as they continue to grow, the ability to collect, store, and really compute data is going to explode. It's just going to be crazy. And it's not going to take that long. Big data will become, it's already big business, already massive business, but it'll become more and more important. How we manage it, how we mine it, etc. We'll be spending a lot more time looking at that. Another one is Internet of Things. The big barrier for IoT that I see right now, I mean, there are spot use cases where IoT already is just ready to make changes. The biggest problem I see preventing IoT from going to that next level is that we don't have really a single platform that everybody's using. We have half a dozen plus platforms that can be used. Once that market refines itself down and we have, say, a single platform, then IoT is going to be massive. I'm trying to think of something to compare how I think it's going to change the world. And there's not much that I can say to describe it. It's just too big of a thought. It's just so big. There's so many places that it can be used. And I love the fact that ServiceNow is already looking at, how do we manage all this IoT data and the reporting on it and all of that. Most organizations don't really look at ServiceNow for IoT, but they need to. Again, going back to the need for that platform business model. If your people are logging into 6 different systems, 7 different systems to get their job done, you're wasting time. You need that single place to execute your job, that single place to go for help, to get answers. And that's a huge part of the platform business model. Now, just one more related trend, and is really cybersecurity. And as we get more and more data, more and more IoT, there's going to be more and more opportunities for cyber criminals. It's just going to be. Cybersecurity is going to become increasingly important. Now, something that ServiceNow released just a few months ago is an OT management solution. And it's brand new. And OT, or operational technology, is where all the machines that manage, say, an assembly line or in a factory of some sort, all those machines are considered like OT. And the way OT is structured, it's not easy to protect. Fujitsu actually released, we were the very first company to get a customer up and running with ServiceNow's OT management solution. And that gives the visibility that we see with just a regular CMDB. That gives the same level of visibility for our OT devices. And then this fall, OT security is coming to ServiceNow. And so that, we talk related trends, bringing OT and the manufacturing factory space, even, let's say, companies that make gasoline for us, to refine gasoline, they use OT tools as well. We've had a few famous hacks just this year where those devices shut down energy production. The hacking of those devices shut down energy, bringing that to the same platform that you're running your other security on. It's going to give executives a much better opportunity to start to make some real strategic decisions.
You are listening to the Alldus podcast. When you're looking to scale your team, or if you are interested in showcasing your company in a future episode, reach out today. Or if you're in the market for a new role, visit our website to view open positions, www.alldus.com.
Obviously, we can't talk digital transformation without talking about ServiceNow. It's the platform of choice. I don't think that's unreasonable to frame it that way. I'd love to know from your view, why is that the platform of choice? And say more to it than that. I'm just really intrigued.
I think it's absolutely the best platform for digital business. There are other platforms, but none of them offer the stability, the performance, the flexibility, and really the potential to serve as a foundation for a platform business model and the customer's digital transformation efforts. There just isn't anything else out there. There's some really cool tools, but they don't fit the same space. They're much more niche. And ServiceNow's high availability architecture is one of the big parts of it, but it's just the way the tool has been built, the way it's been structured, the way that ServiceNow themselves have steered the tool towards the future. It's exciting. And when you get that picture of ServiceNow serving as really the foundation for your platform business model, bringing everybody into that single source, giving you a single source of truth, giving you a single source of action, if you will, that is where we start to see the change or the shift from a linear business model into that exponential space where we can adapt faster and faster. And once again, leadership and everybody involved on the platform get to see more and make much better strategic decisions so that you don't get disrupted.
A lot of the podcasts that we've recorded so far, they've all been very kind of current day ServiceNow. I'd love to know your viewpoint on what's next. What's either next for your business or next on the horizon, or even looking from a more futuristic mindset. What do you, as a ServiceNow evangelist, what do you see on the front in your crystal ball?
Yeah, there's what's next for me and what's next for the ServiceNow universe. Some of the things I am really excited about with what Fujitsu is doing with ServiceNow, it's partially related to the partnership that we have with ServiceNow in promoting some of our artificial intelligence capability. There's the digital annealer, which is going to be fantastic for really helping people, which is a computer chip, by the way, really helping people figure out, like field service management, how can I get the right truck to the right location most effectively, the quickest. There's more and more coming in with different tools like you see in ServiceNow Store that can help you increase your footprint within the platform. Fujitsu Stanza, which is an order management tool, helping you support your supply chain, is one of those. But everything is really coming to the platform, because ServiceNow is, well, like I said, the platform for digital transformation. At the least, every major software manufacturer, every tools maker, or anybody that needs to support, they will need to support integration into and with service. Now, as you see this with almost every single customer, they get ServiceNow and they start to see more and more of what they can do with it. They get excited. But as organizations begin to understand that ServiceNow can support their business, a larger piece of their business, we're going to see more and more industries place so much more of what they're doing, rather than just IT, onto the Now platform. They're going to use the platform at an increasingly rapid pace. It's, again, shifting to the exponential. How you even architected a livestock tracking application on ServiceNow. But that same idea, kind of the general architecture, could be extended to manage almost anything related to managing or tracking, let's say something like our food supply, maybe tracking wild animals, or even the production of something like hemp, the whole seed through the growth process, through distribution and production, etc., that has to be done currently. But with ServiceNow's workflow management, and now I'm fantasizing just a little bit because this is looking pretty far into the future, okay? With ServiceNow's workflow processes and its ability to function as that platform, imagine a manufacturing company that develops specialty auto parts and then has to ship them worldwide. But because of where they're located, because of the cost it takes to set up the manufacturing, they're in like one location, and it may take 3-4 months to get a part to something. But using ServiceNow, you identify where the customer is, identify what part they're using, store the data for that part on ServiceNow, but then use additive manufacturing and build it in regional. So you go from potentially having to build something maybe in China to get the per unit cost down, to putting it someplace else where you don't need a complete factory. You have that 3D printer and print the part and ship it to them in a couple of days. It's additive manufacturing, ServiceNow, it's all coming to the platform. It's going to be really exciting. And by shortening that span of delivery, shortening the time it takes to make that exchange, we really start to eliminate the opportunity for the competition to disrupt your business.
Interesting, as you were talking through that last example, it doesn't sound too far-fetched either, does it? Even though you say that is in the future, it doesn't sound like it would be impossible.
The cost is all about setting up the devices. Maybe you have to have 6, 8, 10 devices around the world to make it. But for me, when I was thinking about that, I always say, okay, but what if? The real cool part would be if you could have independent manufacturers, okay, with their 3D printing equipment, who basically are going to white label your service. You just choose the one that's closest to you, send the data to them, and they print it off. The key to that, when you ask what if my data is highly specialized and I don't want them to steal it? So a big question to ask now is, how do we protect the data so that source vendor, the vendor who's doing the printing, won't steal it? Then it'll be a big jump. It'll be crazy.
You mentioned before, obviously, you have a number of developers and architects reporting into you. So I'd just like to touch on some of the mentorship piece again. So as a leader, again, we're seeing people navigate that quite quickly probably earlier on in their careers than maybe we've seen in the past. What are some of your what would be some of your advice to someone making that journey again? But and I'm thinking specifically when we're looking at like building, maintaining a winning ServiceNow team.
Yeah, I think there's a few factors to it. I think the number one thing you have to do is make sure you care about and for your team. ServiceNow jobs are way too easy to get for someone to, I don't know. And one of the big things to do for them, your employees, let me take half a step back when I say that. Say the next thing. I've seen a number of consultancies who are so focused on efficiency that they limit people's ability to do something new. They might just work on catalog items. And I interviewed a developer with 5 years of experience about a month and a half ago, who came from a very large organization, but he'd spent 5 years working on nothing but catalog items. And we couldn't use them. We couldn't do it. So to prevent something like that, you have to drive training. You have to drive training. Your people should be certified across multiple applications on the platform, quite honestly, as many as possible. And that's how you build an agile team within ServiceNow. We need the team members who are multi-skilled and able to serve in multiple areas, and of course, back each other up when needed. If you don't do that, then you're really handicapping your employee, and honestly, you will ultimately handicap your organization. You need to make sure, and then you need, moving on with training, make sure you understand where your team members want to take their own career and actually work hard with them as much as you can to make sure it happens. It's just huge. As they grow, it's good for their career and it's good for your business.
I love that. Keeping the human side of it front of mind, it sounds as well. Just as we come to a close, I've said it a few times now, you've navigated different companies, you've grown your role from analyst to director. You're obviously front of mind for ServiceNow. But if you had to offer some advice to a younger Gerald, to go back 10 years and have a chat to yourself and give yourself some advice, what advice would you give yourself?
I appreciate it, Ben. Thank you. I think there's only a couple points, really. Some of them weren't really easy for me to understand. But I love the phrase, or ABB, or the phrase, always be branding. I think if you really, yes, you have to deliver value, but you also have to make sure people understand that you're delivering value. Establish yourself as a thought leader within your organization. Let people know this is what I've learned, this is what's happening, and also with your customers. And then push it everywhere else you can. LinkedIn is huge for people. Get on LinkedIn. Treat it like, social media. Get some training on how to use LinkedIn for business. Spend some time with it. For a consultant, that's a huge thing, because most buyers do research online before they ever contact a vendor. And if they already know that you're a ServiceNow, and I'm using air quotes, thought leader, then they're much more likely to reach out or to respond when you reach out to them. And really, everybody, you see all the time in these real motivational videos where people are like, you got to grind until you make it. Work hard until you're there. I tell you, working hard is nowhere near enough. Everyone works hard. If you're not working hard, then you're going to lose your job. That's the way it is. And what you have to realize is that if you're not increasing your value to the organization, then the organization's investment in you becomes stagnant. And nobody out there wants to invest in something that won't improve the rate of return. It just doesn't happen. And then an important part is never stop training. It's really how you stay relevant, where you quite often find how you can add more value. I'm taking like 3 courses right now, and it's a big part of how I drive the value that I return.
I think there are some amazing pieces of advice, and thank you for those. Anything else you'd like to add before we call it a day? I think you've covered so much here. I think we've been so lucky to have you on. Anything you'd like to add before we close?
Honestly, just anybody who hears this, please check me out on LinkedIn. Let's make that connection. And if I can help you with anything ServiceNow, digital transformation related, let's get that conversation going.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Gerald, it's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot. See you, buddy.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.